Across the world, millions of viewers held their breath as the final moments of Star Trek: The Next Generation unfolded on television screens. For 7 unforgettable years, the series didn't just explore space, it explored humanity itself. Viewers journeyed aboard the USS Enterprise, faced impossible moral choices, survived cosmic threats, and watched a distant, disciplined captain slowly reveal the man beneath the uniform. What came next wasn't an explosion or a farewell speech. It was a quiet moment that would emotionally define an entire generation. At the center of it all stood Captain Jean-Luc Picard, a character who redefined leadership on television. He was calm, intellectual, principled, and unwavering in his sense of duty. Over time, viewers watched him evolve from a distant authority figure into a man shaped by experience, sacrifice, and quiet reflection. And yet, when the series came to an end, it didn't do so with explosions or heroic deaths. It ended with something far more intimate. A poker game. To truly understand why that final scene became one of the most emotional endings in television history, you first have to understand how different the finale, titled All Good Things, was from anything that came before it. Instead of following a traditional narrative structure, the episode jumped between 3 timelines: the past, the present, and the future. This bold storytelling choice allowed the audience to see multiple versions of Picard at different stages of his life. Once again, humanity was placed on trial by the omnipotent being Q, who subjected Picard to one final test. The fate of all existence hung in the balance, but beneath the high-stakes science fiction was a deeply personal story. Behind the scenes, writers Ronald D. Moore and Brannon Braga faced an enormous challenge. They had to honor 7 years of storytelling while also satisfying studio expectations for a grand finale that could lead into future films. The studio wanted spectacle. They wanted something massive. But the writers knew the real story wasn't about saving the universe one more time. It was about saving Jean-Luc Picard from the emotional isolation he had carried for decades. Throughout The Next Generation, Picard was defined by distance. He was professional, formal, and deeply private. While crew members like William Riker, Data, Geordi L.A. Forge, Worf, and Deanna Troi regularly gathered to play poker, Picard remained alone in his ready room. He spent his evenings reading Shakespeare, listening to classical music, and drinking Earl Grey tea in solitude. This separation wasn't accidental. Picard believed that command required emotional distance. As captain, he made decisions that affected lives every day, and he feared that friendship would compromise his judgment. To him, leadership meant sacrifice, even if that sacrifice was his own happiness. The man portraying him understood that isolation intimately. Patrick Stewart, a classically trained Shakespearean actor, brought discipline, restraint, and emotional control to the role. He shaped Picard as a man of intellect and honor, but also one burdened by loneliness. Over 7 seasons, the audience saw glimpses of the man beneath the uniform, his love of archaeology, his strained relationship with his family, and brief romances that never fully took root. Yet no matter how close he came to connection, Picard always returned to being alone. That's why the ending mattered so much. Originally, All Good Things ended immediately after Picard solved Q's puzzle and saved humanity. The story concluded, the universe was safe, and the credits rolled. But Patrick Stewart felt something was missing. He believed the character needed to show genuine growth, not just intellectual victory. He spoke up. The writers listened. They added one final scene. In the closing moments, Picard walks into the poker game that has been taking place without him for 7 years. The crew looks up in surprise. There is a brief pause. Then Picard asks a simple question: can he join? Riker smiles and responds that he should have done this a long time ago. When Picard replies, "I should have done this a long time ago," the line lands with extraordinary weight. It's not just about a card game. It's an admission, a realization, A quiet confession that duty had kept him from connection for far too long. During filming, emotions ran high. The cast had spent 7 years together, and everyone knew this was goodbye. Multiple takes were disrupted because the actors couldn't hold back tears. For Patrick Stewart, the moment blurred the line between actor and character. He wasn't just saying farewell as Picard. He was saying goodbye to a chapter of his own life. The final line, "The sky's the limit," became instantly iconic. On the surface, it was poker terminology, meaning there was no maximum bet. But symbolically, it represented infinite possibility, openness, and a new beginning. When Star Trek: The Next Generation ended, Patrick Stewart made it clear he was finished with Star Trek. He feared being permanently defined by Jean-Luc Picard. Despite his gratitude for the role, he wanted to return to theater, classical acting, and more varied projects. He turned down appearances, cameos, and repeated invitations to return to the franchise. Instead, he rebuilt his career elsewhere, eventually achieving massive success as Professor Charles Xavier in the X-Men films. For years, he resisted looking back. But time has a way of changing perspective. As he grew older, Stewart began to understand what Picard meant to millions of people around the world. More importantly, he began to understand what the character meant to him. When he was approached about returning for Star Trek: Picard, his initial response was still hesitation, but the concept intrigued him. This new series wasn't about reliving past glory. It was about exploring what happens after the adventure ends. It was about aging, reflection, regret, and second chances. Now in his 70s, Patrick Stewart viewed that final poker game through a completely different lens. In interviews, he has spoken openly about how the meaning of that scene evolved for him. He realized it wasn't simply a touching moment between colleagues. It was the culmination of Picard's journey toward becoming fully human. Stewart even drew parallels between the character's late-life awakening and his own personal experiences, including finding love and openness later in life. Like Picard, he spent much of his early career behind emotional walls, prioritizing discipline and professionalism over vulnerability. The poker game, he now says, represents one of the most important lessons anyone can learn, that excellence and duty matter. But connection matters more. He has admitted that when he watches that scene today, he cries every time. Not because it's nostalgic, but because he finally understands its truth. Picard wasn't just joining a card game. He was choosing life. Nearly 30 years later, All Good Things is still regarded as one of the greatest series finales in television history. Unlike other Star Trek endings that relied on grand spectacle, this finale chose simplicity and humanity. Deep Space Nine ended with ascension. Voyager ended with arrival. The Next Generation ended with connection. Psychologically, the moment resonates because it reflects real life. Everyone knows someone like Picard, someone who hides behind responsibility, control, and achievement. And at some point, most people become that person themselves. The ending reminds us that it's never too late to change, never too late to sit down at the table and let others in. The phrase, "The sky's the limit," carries deeper meaning than most viewers realize. For 7 years, Picard imposed limits on himself: emotional distance, rigid boundaries, and self-denial. By joining the game, he dismantled those limits. He didn't stop being a leader. He became something more complete. That's why the finale avoided absolute closure. It didn't show what came next. It left the future open. That openness allowed the story to continue through films, new series, and decades of imagination. The writers understood something profound. The best endings are not conclusions, but beginnings. At its heart, Star Trek: The Next Generation was always a story about humanity, about learning, evolving, and choosing connection over isolation. Jean-Luc Picard's journey reminds us that it's never too late to lower our defenses and let others in. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the bravest words are simply, "Deal me in."